And we are back with more on NewsTalk Saga 960. So very glad you could join us on this edition of the Mark Petroni Show. And it's that time again when we delve into the wonderful world of cryptocurrency, not just Bitcoin, but all the others, the stable coins. We're finding out more and more about the nature of transactions, what's going on in terms of the take up around the world. It turns out that Africa may be ground zero for growth of cryptocurrencies, at least if you believe some stories. Some say it's more like Latin America, countries like El Salvador. And who else to ask about that but our friend, Mr. Dichter, Benjamin Dichter, joining us, our guru, our techno
Guru.
enthusiast. He's the guy
How are
who
you?
is leading us through the minefield of cryptocurrency for those of us who want to get into it, don't really know what we're doing, and just kind of feeling our way through the dark. And Benjamin, of course, has been at it for well, how long have you been into this now, cryptocurrencies?
2000 and well, I mean, I got to qualify by saying I did a lot of research for 18 months prior to actually buying, and it was quite difficult to buy when I first got in. But really, since 2015,
And what was Bitcoin trading at back then when you first got in?
it was low. It was, I mean, when I first started researching it, it was well below $1,000. So it's quite low
Wow,
back then.
nice. So, why did you decide to start researching cryptocurrencies? What drew you to the subject to begin with?
I was always kind of I mean, I'm kind of a techie nerd anyways, so it was always in the peripheral. And I don't think I'm remembering, but I think it was first told to me around 2010 when it first came out. But the problem is you had to have such an advanced understanding in my mind as a user to build a wallet, to, write the code to transfer coins from one wallet to another. So like a lot of people say, oh, I wish I got in at 2009, 2010. Good luck. You wouldn't have been able to. I wouldn't have been able to buy it because I just didn't have the skill set to do it. And really, it was around 2016 where we started to see some onboarding solutions for regular people, and that's really when I started to buy in. So don't feel bad if you didn't get in early because it wasn't exactly easy.
Well, who knows? Maybe this is early, right? I mean,
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
true.
interesting. We're looking at Tonga as one of the early adopters. This is the weird part, the Kingdom of Tonga. So here's a country that is still a kingdom, Benjamin, that is moving ahead to what many say is sort of the cutting edge of currency, of the use of digital money going forward. So it's still a kingdom. It still has this antiquated form of government, extremely antiquated, and yet here they are adopting, quite possibly getting ready to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. That, according to a former member of parliament. The story is the Kingdom of Tonga may adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. And Lord Fuzitsua, who tweeted about a possible timeline for this event to occur. This guy's a player. He's a former member of Tonga's parliament, and he believes that by fall, a bill will be passed by Tonga's parliament, and Bitcoin could very well be legal tender by that region in November of this year. So, how big a deal is that?
Well, the fact that Tonga has more self-awareness and more vision than Justin Trudeau, and the what they call are liberal, but are very anti-liberal. You talk about antiquated. I give you the philosophy behind Justin Trudeau and the Canadian government, and yeah, it's no surprise that Tonga is more advanced. Tonga's more advanced. They have a royal family, I believe, and one of the members of the royal family, younger guy, has been doing the circuit for a couple of years on many of the Bitcoin podcasts. He's been in the space. He's been learning about it for quite a while, as well as a couple of members of parliament. And so this is no surprise because to those of us who've been in the space, that's really when we first discovered Tonga, when people from the government started reaching out and saying, "Hey, maybe we should do something." And now that it's been so successful in El Salvador, they're likely to go down the same path. And I think we're going to see it being legal tender not only in Tonga this year, at least one, maybe two other countries.
All right. So why are these countries doing it? I mean, on one hand, they seem very backwards. I mean, I don't want to make a disparaging judgment of the Tongolese people or the country of Tonga, but we're not talking about what you would term your typical first world nation. Why is a country like this gravitating towards digital money like Bitcoin when it seems to be so backwards in other areas? I'm trying to square that circle and I'm having trouble.
Well, that's the whole point. I mean, this is the strategy. You're not going to get a mass adoption to Bitcoin in the first world, which is the most financially stable countries in the world. You're going to see countries that have financial instability, massive debt, high poverty rate, high crime rate. Those are the ones who are going to adopt it first. So this is no surprise. This is exactly what we would expect. You know, the U.S.
Okay.
is going to be the laggard in this. They're going to be the last, maybe not the U.S., but the Western nations will be the last ones on board because they're the world reserve currency. Well, why would they move to a different currency? They would adopt it if it advanced in the marketplace. But when you're in a place like El Salvador, Colombia passed some Bitcoin legislation about 6 months ago. All of these countries that have massive debt and they don't have the financial infrastructure that we have in North America, yeah, of course they're going to adopt it.
So, will the destruction of our currencies, what some people say is uh, going to happen over time as we see inflation eat into the buying power of Americans, of Canadians,
Mm-hmm.
of Europeans, and so the creation of trillions of dollars in order to prop up and reinflate asset bubbles like stocks and real estate. I mean, over time, there are many who see that as eventually going something that has to end, economically speaking. We're going over a cliff. Do you see that as perhaps the big window of opportunity for cryptocurrencies to come in and sort of save the day once these currencies that we've all been using for years, the greenback, the loonie, the dollar, whatever the
Mm-hmm.
euro, once all these currencies start to get more and more pressure, put under pressure through inflation, through grotesque levels of money printing, do you see it only a matter of time that cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin will be waiting in the wings for the inevitable destruction of all these other currencies?
Well, that's what it's originally designed for. That's the purpose of Bitcoin. Now, I'm one of the people who thinks things are going to crash. There's going to be a major crash. And when I say major, your stock portfolio is going to go down in value by 40, 50% sometime in the next few years. And we're going to see inflation over several years. But I don't think it's really as bad. It's not going to be as bad as people think. Just primarily the mass shortage of U.S. dollars in the U.S. Euro dollar market. That vacuum has been sitting there for years and is desperate for U.S. dollars. So there is actually a shortage of U.S. dollars on the global economic landscape. So because of that, I don't think the U.S. dollar over the long term will be as badly as affected as people think it is. Yeah, in the short term, over the next 5 years or so, for sure. But irrespective of what happens, Bitcoin's always going to be there, and the first people that are going to gravitate to it are the people who are in financial dire straits merely because of geographical reasons, because they live in certain countries in Africa and South America, for example. And that just goes to show how Bitcoin feeds human behavior. Okay, things are not desperate here. But when the stock market collapses by 50%, you're telling me you don't know people that are going to look and say, okay, Bitcoin's only down 5%. My entire portfolio is down 50. Maybe I should put a little bit of money into Bitcoin.
Yeah, it is interesting that you mentioned that because we've seen kind of parallel moves. We saw, for instance, tech stocks get smoked recently, and when that was taking place, rather than seeing a flight to safety, which you might consider cryptocurrency to be, you saw Bitcoin take a hit as well, and gold kind of fluctuated, went up, it went down. It didn't move as much as say Bitcoin did, but crypto did fall in tandem with tech stocks. Any thought about that?
I don't know. I can't say for certain if that's the reason. I mean, there are a lot of people who are constantly trying to build these correlations that aren't necessarily there. And if you chart Bitcoin over the past 10 years, you'll see more often than not, there's not a correlation. But sometimes there is, right? Things change. There's going to be times where people who are in Bitcoin, like the major investment houses, are going to move money out of Bitcoin into stocks or out of stocks into Bitcoin or vice versa, or out of the entire stock market, tech market. It depends on your perspective. Some investors say Bitcoin's part of the tech market. Others say no, it's a completely different asset. So I don't think there's one reason here or there, and we're just seeing the regular cycle of Bitcoin. Like, remember, we are mid-cycle right now, and we should have been significantly lower than where we are right now if we were going to follow the regular 4-year pattern of Bitcoin. So a lot of
Okay, so
people
I
in the
want to get to that.
market.
I'm going to ask about that mid-coin cycle and exactly what it means. And as
Okay.
I understand, it correlates with the number of Bitcoin that remain to be mined and the rest of it. But I got to ask you about Rio de Janeiro, the city, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, to invest 1% of its treasury in cryptocurrency. That, according to Bitcoin News. Rio,
Mhm.
one of the largest cities in Brazil and the world, I might add, will invest part of its treasury in crypto. The announcement was made by the mayor of that city, Eduardo Paes, during Rio's Innovation Week. The plan is to turn the city into a cryptocurrency friendly hub, and there are other tax incentives that will also be put in place to achieve this objective, that according to reports. I mean, that again does not really surprise me, considering the currencies in South America, whether you're talking about the Argentinian, is it the peso? I think that's peso, right? The
Mhm.
Venezuelan currency, the bolivar, I think it's called. I mean, these
Yep.
currencies have been devalued massively, particularly the Venezuelan one. I mean, inflation is running it's just astronomical levels. So it doesn't surprise me that South American countries would be looking at something like Bitcoin as a way to eventually move into and stabilize their ability to do transactions in those countries.
Yeah, and if you see it happening in those countries, like your original point when we were talking about Tonga, and you were saying, well, why are these countries getting into it? And I explained it's going to start with the countries who have weaker economies, or they have financial struggles. Well, here you go. Now you have Rio de Janeiro that's seeing Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation, as a store of value. The city of Miami is proposed to be trying to do the same, as well as other jurisdictions throughout the United States. So the taps are just being opened up slightly. The flood is going to start, and when it hits, boom, you're going to see in a period of 6 months, we're going to go from a world where a few jurisdictions have a little bit of Bitcoin in treasury to boom, everybody wants it. And that's going to
Okay.
be a major moment for Bitcoin.
Okay. So, two questions arising from that. I got
Well,
to go to break fairly soon, but
all right.
what kind of time horizon are you looking at? And question B, what does that do to the price? I mean, why don't you tackle part of that, and then you know what? Why don't we take a break first, and then come
Okay.
right back, and then consider those questions, and then answer them, tackle those when we get back. How's that?
Sure.
Got to take a quick time out, commercial break, and back with more on NewsTalk Saga 960 and the Mark Petroni Show after this. And we are back with more on NewsTalk Saga 960. So very glad you could join us on this edition of the Mark Petroni Show. It is our Bitcoin cryptocurrency segment with Benjamin Dichter. And I threw a couple of questions at Benjamin. And part of this arose from this move by Rio de Janeiro to invest 1% of its treasury in cryptocurrency. That, according to Bitcoin News. So Rio de Janeiro is a world city, and
Mhm.
huge numbers of people. So here's another country in what many consider the third world, although Brazil is considered a BRIC nation, right? So emerging economy, huge numbers of people, and always considered one day to be a major economic powerhouse, global powerhouse. Hasn't quite happened yet, but maybe this will be the ticket that Brazil uses to move into the upper echelons of global economies. I don't know. It's quite possible. Question is, will cryptocurrency help it get there? And the other side of it that we looked at is once all these other countries adopt, everybody jumps in. So we've had, countries like Tonga and El Salvador and Colombia get in, dip their feet in, and then maybe make a little bit of a move. And according to Benjamin Dichter, that is just the tip of the iceberg, that a bunch of other countries are going to jump in head first, and then it's explosion time in terms of the use and adoption of cryptocurrencies. And my question is twofold. What kind of time horizon are we looking at that? And B, what does that do to the price? Benjamin?
The answer to the first one, I have no idea. Second one, I know, but I have no idea how much. How about that for an answer? No, I think.
All right. Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate that.
Exactly. Well, what am I going to?
Nobody wants.
I'm going to sit here like. I'm going to sit here like CNBC and make up nonsense and just talk out of my rear. Like, I don't know. It could be.
Will forget about it tomorrow anyway, so who cares? I mean, nobody's going to hold you to it. Nobody's going to come back 6 months from now and say,
no,
hey,
but
man, you said it was going to go up to $100,000 and it's only $85,000.
To which I would say in life, there are no guarantees. I think when's it going to happen? I don't know. It's like, when is the next global crash going to happen? It should have happened already a number of years ago. But when it does, eventually it will. These things are inevitable, right? And that's why I tell everybody, just don't worry about the price. Don't worry about, don't ever buy any Bitcoin or anything on margin or leveraged. Just stack sats. Just buy a little bit. The dollar cost average every week. Get a little bit of exposure into it. Don't go crazy. Put 1% or 5% or whatever of your net worth in it and set it and forget it. And the worst that can happen is all of this that has been coming to fruition continues to do so. And you see the upside on it in the next, after the next halving cycle or the cycle after that.
Yeah. Okay. We got to talk about these cycles that you keep referring to. Actually, you know what? Why don't we do that now? Mid-cycle. Okay. So what are you referring to when you talk about the mid-cycle of Bitcoin and crypto?
So it runs on a 4-year cycle. And the reason it runs on a 4-year cycle is because the amount of Bitcoin that is mined, or in older terms, minted every day, gets cut in half. So right now, 900 Bitcoins are minted or mined a day for the entire world. And in 2 years from now, because we're mid-cycle, the last halving was 2020. In 2024, I believe it's going to be around the same time, April, May, something like that. We're going to have another halving, and the daily supply of new Bitcoin for the entire world is going to be 450 coins a day for the entire global economy. So if we start to see,
which is not a lot. And I understand. Do you know how many Bitcoin have actually been lost? Because I understand that we could be talking about thousands of them that will never be recovered. Or
it's estimated. It's estimated between 4 and 6 million coins have been lost.
Between 4 and 6 million of the 21.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's a lot. I mean, percentage-wise, that's like maybe a quarter.
That's right. And so that's why,
like, roughly almost like, somewhere between 15 and 20%, 25%. Doing quick math in my head here of Bitcoin have been lost and may never be recovered.
Exactly. Because listen, when Bitcoin started and people started, getting interested, remember, it was computer nerds. They were programming back and forth and sending each other tokens. They hoped that this would be the trajectory of Bitcoin, but they didn't really know that, right? So people were careless where they kept it. They had old hard drives, they threw it out. Oh, there's 10 million Bitcoin on it, or 10,000 Bitcoin, but it's only worth 5 cents. So who cares, right? They didn't know that we would be in such financial dire straits globally and that Bitcoin would be seen as one of the life rafts. Who knew that, right? The creators of Bitcoin knew that because that's what they planned. This is, what they hoped would come to fruition. So
Okay.
it's not it's not the it's not the design of the system that's caused people to lose Bitcoin. It's just they had some and they didn't think it was going to amount to anything in the future. Okay.
Well, here's what you would search. I guess you could call this guy what, a Bitcoin whale, but he's been an investor, Bill Miller, and now he apparently he's 50% in. And I think when people found out that he had done this,
Had a
considering
heart
that he's kind
attack.
of your typical establishment investor, some
Yeah.
people were taken aback. They said, Bill, have you lost your marbles? Let's listen a little bit to what Miller had to say about Bitcoin and his investments in it.
Other companies.
So it's an insurance policy? Is that how we should look at it? I mean, number one, you don't live in Argentina. You do live in a country, with a rule of law, and I'm not sure the dollar is really a stable currency, but it certainly holds its value. Somebody else could, create another Bitcoin. It's not governed by any rule of law. So, why such confidence in it as an investment, aside from the fact that it certainly has worked really well and more people are kind of jumping on the bandwagon?
There's several different ways to approach that.
Yeah.
I would say that right now, it's best thought of as digital gold. So gold is, as people have said, a store of value for 5,000 years.
Right.
And gold is what people typically fled to when the governments tried to, inflate them out. And in the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt confiscated everybody's gold in 1933. You had to turn it in or you went to jail. So they can't confiscate your Bitcoin because there's nothing, you hold it securely. As long as you have an internet connection, you can send it somewhere instantaneously at very low cost. And the reason I like the insurance company analogy is because if you think about, people talk about the intrinsic value of Bitcoin. This is a Warren Buffett argument, that Bitcoin has no intrinsic value. It doesn't have any earnings. It'll never pay any dividends. And so how do you even think about something like that? It is a new technology. It's something that couldn't be done before. But in any case, the answer that I have to that is, well, I mean, what's the intrinsic value of that Mickey Mantle baseball card that sold for $5.5 million? It's just cardboard, and it doesn't even have a legend. It could be counterfeited very easily. Or what's the intrinsic value of a Picasso painting, which is just canvas and paint, and maybe a frame? But people will pay millions or tens of millions of dollars for it. And so it comes down at the very basic level for supply and demand. So Bitcoin is the only economic entity where the supply is unaffected by the demand. So even with gold, if gold, which is $1,800 today, if gold goes to $18,000, there will be a lot more gold mined because mines that are unprofitable will become profitable. And so gold, which accretes today, the production of gold is equal to about 1.5% to 2% of the total value per year. That's the same accretion that Bitcoin has currently. But this year, 2022, I think will drop below 1.5% on that. So only 21 million Bitcoin can ever be created or close to it. It doesn't matter if Bitcoin is 100,000 or 20 million, there's only going to be that many of them. So all you have to really believe is that the demand for Bitcoin will grow faster than 1.5%, over the next number of years, and the price inexorably will go up. So I've only recently been allowing myself to be described as a Bitcoin bull. I used to tell people, they say, oh, you're a Bitcoin bull, you own a lot of Bitcoin. I'm like, I do own a lot of it, but I'm actually a Bitcoin observer, and I'm observing its trajectory as a new technology and comparing it to the trajectories of things like the printing press, or the steam engine, or the railroads, or the automobile, or electricity, and it's following that very, not predictable, because it's not predictable certainly in the early days, a well understood path for the adoption of new technologies. And I think Stan Druckenmiller said earlier in the year that, and now he owns Bitcoin, by the way, but he said that Bitcoin was a solution in search of a problem. And what I've found amusing about that is every new technology is a solution in search of a problem. Because you have a new technology, then you try and figure out what you're going to do with it. And so, when we created the internet, what are we going to do with that? So the Defense Department had good uses for it, but it was tough for other people to see. But now everybody can see what the value of the internet is. Same thing with the internal combustion engine, which was very dangerous and all, but now that's taken over the world, and now we're going to move to electricity. So all kinds of technologies have to grow into their potential. And Bitcoin is, I guess if you want the theoretical answer to the question, is it's the work of Brian Arthur, Santa Fe Institute, and Stanford, who is kind of the leading authority on what he calls increasing returns economics and what he calls lock-in and path dependence in the economy. So his basic idea is that when technologies reach a certain dominance and they're the leader, it's almost impossible to dislodge them, even without a very superior technology.
And Bitcoin's there? Is that what?
That's what I would say I and the other bulls believe.
Okay. But why the outsized, why 50% of your personal net worth? I mean, I'm assuming that the other 50% is in like Miller value funds, or I don't know how you've diversified. And
well, actually close to the other 50% is in Amazon. All of the rest of the investments that I have are basically there to support margin debt, because I'm typically always on margin, which means I can take a lot of volatility. Now, I'm not obviously on deadly margin. I'm under using regular Reg T margin, and I've got a fair amount of margin capacity. But the rest of all the stocks could eliminate all the margin debt and have a fair amount left over, and then I'd have those. If I had to sell all those to pay off the debt, then still have Bitcoin and Amazon.
Bill, can you explain to me the concept of Bitcoin as an insurance policy?
There's 21 million shares of this insurance company outstanding, and every day that somebody wakes up and says, I need some insurance in case something, in case the government seizes all the gold like they did back in 1933. Or, when Afghanistan, we pulled out of Afghanistan, Western Union stopped remittances. So if you couldn't get money, and it's still hard to get money in Afghanistan, you were in serious trouble. In Lebanon, the lira has completely collapsed. Venezuela is a failed state. And yet Bitcoin continues right along. That was your insurance policy against financial catastrophe of one sort or another. And what did the Fed do when the pandemic shut down all parts of, or threatened to shut down all parts of the economy? The financial markets came unglued, and the normal relationships between cash and bonds and securities, especially asset-backed securities, got blown apart. And the Fed had to increase the money supply by 25% to keep those things from collapsing as they did in 2008.
Right.
During that time, the Bitcoin network functioned perfectly. There was no run on it. There was, prices went down initially until people figured out, wait a minute, we've had a tremendous collapse here, and the Bitcoin blockchain is functioning without any interference at all. So I think that explains it, I think, in a way that many people can understand. If you want a little bit of financial insurance, then buy a Bitcoin or a part of a Bitcoin. The argument I get most often is, why not gold?
Right, which is considered to be an insurance policy against catastrophe historically.
So the answer to that is, in my opinion anyway, gold has gone from been around 5,000 years, so it's gone from, make up a number and say a dime, a nickel in today's parlance. And in 5,000 years, it's gone from a nickel to $1,850. And in 10 years, Bitcoin has gone from a nickel to $57,000. So why would I own gold? Especially since gold in the last 10 years has gone down. In the last 10 years, Bitcoin is the best performing asset category in the world.
Dollar cost average.
So there you go. That's a good stopping point, 50%. So here was a guy who was intrigued by Bitcoin because of countries like Argentina that have been wiped out repeatedly, which the people have been wiped out. And now, of course, even countries like Canada now starting to look at their leaders and wondering if maybe these extremely reckless and corrupt individuals are going to lead that country down the same path as countries like Venezuela. And so, but he's saying that it's the reason why he got more and more into it is because more and more other people were getting into it. So it's kind of the lemming mentality here. That's what I'm hearing. I'm not saying that he's not an extremely intelligent guy, and obviously he's a billionaire and I'm not, but isn't there something to what I'm saying in terms of, well, I'm getting into it because all those other people are getting into it, so I got to get in.
I don't think that's what he was saying at all. He's saying the inverse. And he's also trying to explain that people who say it has no intrinsic value doesn't understand how we value anything, because nothing has intrinsic value. What, do you use gold to go to make some electronics? Like, come on, that's not how the world works. That's how the world worked, decades ago. Or people, oh, I can melt gold and do something with it. Yeah, good luck doing that when the government steals it from you.
Well,
so his point is
okay.
nothing has intrinsic value in the traditional sense, but what Bitcoin does have is it has a specific intrinsic value, which is its security and the fact that no one can touch it, and that makes it more valuable than some of the other assets like gold that can be repossessed.
Okay, so that's your argument for holding Bitcoin. I mean, can't they come at your crypto anyway? I mean, isn't there a way that they could? I mean, if you've got a phone, surely that they can get a hold of your phone, right?
Yeah, but it's and this is the thing that people have struggled to wrap their head around, as did I when I first got involved. Okay, so you got my phone. I have a Bitcoin wallet. Where's my Bitcoin stored? It's not stored on my phone. It's stored on the blockchain. There's nothing on your phone. The only thing that's on your phone is basically a security code that allows you to access it. But somebody steals your phone. Let's say you got tons of Bitcoin. Somebody steals your phone. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So you take your seed phrase, your security code, you buy a new phone, you download a Bitcoin wallet, you enter your seed phrase, and boom, there's your Bitcoin. Because it's not actually stored on your phone.
Okay, but say for instance the exchange that you were dealing with, they go under.
You said exchange. Well, is your Bitcoin on an exchange, or is your Bitcoin in your own wallet? A wallet and an exchange are two different things. There are two different types. I'll explain this not too technically, but there are two different types of wallets: a custodial wallet and non-custodial wallet. A custodial wallet is what an exchange has. It means they have the private key to move Bitcoin out of one wallet to the other. But when you're the custodial, you are the only person in the world that has the security key that can authenticate the Bitcoin and allow it to be moved. That's why those people that had, in the earlier example, they have 10,000 Bitcoin years and years ago, they thought it wouldn't amount to anything. It's because it's stored on the blockchain. The Bitcoin is still there. They just can't access it because they don't have the private key. It's the private key that was saved on the hard drive that they don't have access to. But the Bitcoin is still there. You can still see it on the ledger. That must make you crazy. Imagine that. You have a couple $100 million, you want to access it. You can see it on the blockchain where you bought it or mined it, whatever. But because you don't have your password, it was stored on a hard drive you threw out. You can't access your $250 million. And that's what's happened to that guy in England. So he's not looking
for these people. Is there any hope for him? I mean, at all?
One of the issues, and I think this is a skill people have to develop moving forward in our society, is people are really loosey-goosey with passwords. They use the same password over and over again. They don't have a password manager. They don't organize it into a proper database and whatever. And that's a skill. It's not something we were taught. But we need to learn that. And Bitcoin is a perfect example as to why that becomes important. It's more than people just getting into your Facebook or your email. It's about they'll be able to get into your money if you don't sit down and actually structure what are your passwords, for which accounts, how do you store them, how are they secured, what sort of encryption, and that is vital.
All right. I got to wrap things up, but...
Right.
Okay, so we've got NewsTalk Crypto, right? So people will be able to access. People will be able to see this show. They can see much of the stuff that we've done on the Mark Petroni Show with Saga 960, of course. We've continued to have these, I think, fascinating exchanges of information. I hope people are getting something out of it. And so we're going to keep it going, right? These discussions.
Yeah, and tell them this. If anybody has any questions, send them an email. Have them send you an email, and we can see what people are still like. I know it's really daunting to get into Bitcoin. It was for me, and I have a tech background, right? So I advise people just take your time, don't rush it, and if you have any questions, send it to Mark Petroni.
Well, it just dawned on me that I mean, if you've got your password in your head, like you once told me, and I got to wrap this up. This is open up another can of worms here. But so you remember them, and so presumably they're in your head. But if in the unlikely and extremely unfortunate event of some kind of an injury, boom, it could be gone. And you're not a big
Okay.
fan of keeping passwords in safes and stuff like that, or security boxes or anything.
No, that's silly. I'll give you a quick tip and we'll go. This is for everybody listening.
All right.
Create a password algorithm. What is that? Write out a sentence that's natural to you. I don't know. I like the Los Angeles Lakers $13. Let's say your favorite number. Then just take the first letter of each word and make that a password and put the name of the application at the end every time. That way now, if you lost all your passwords or you couldn't get into your 1Password database, if you formatted all your passwords to have the same suffix or prefix and you just put the name of the application in there somewhere, now you have a system that you can rescue it yourself, even if everything was stripped from you.
Okay. Words of wisdom. Thank you, Benjamin. Appreciate it.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Benjamin Dichter. All right. And that is this latest edition of our segment, NewsTalk Crypto, right here on Saga 960. Got to take another time out, commercial break. Back with more on NewsTalk Saga 960 and the Mark Petroni Show after this.